Well, and a gracious hello to everyone, wherever you happen to be. I am your host, Mike Hinkson, and you are listening and watching Unstoppable Mindset, the podcast where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And we love the unexpected. That's what we get to talk about more than anything else, as I love to say. Unexpected is anything that doesn't directly deal with inclusion or diversity, and that's what we do. So here we are. And I get to talk today with a man who I've learned to admire a lot. He is an entrepreneur by any standard. He doesn't let things knock him down and slow him down. His name is Akeem Shannon. And Akeem is a person who's developed a very interesting product that we're going to talk about a little bit. But more than talking about the product, we're going to talk about how he got to the product, what he does with it, where he's going in the future, and any other unexpected things that come along that I'm not thinking of. So, Akeem, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Well, cool. Well, why don't we start, if we can, by you telling us a little bit about kind of the early Akeem growing up and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I grew up in the middle of the country, St. Louis, Missouri. Grew up in a Christian home, typical Midwesterner type of vibe. And I remember I went off to college, excuse me, went off to high school, and I went off to a Catholic school because our local public school was terrible. And I got a scholarship. And I get a scholarship to go to high school, and I lose the scholarship. This is like sophomore year. And my parents could not afford to send me to this Catholic school without the scholarship. And so I had to beg and plead with the admissions director, Miss Gibbons, to convince her to kind of, move some numbers around in the computer so that I wouldn't lose my scholarship. And she was like, Akeem, if I do this, you better get your grades up. And that I did. And so I went on to earn a full scholarship to go to Howard University in Washington, D.C. to study chemical engineering.
So did you lose the
And
scholarship in high school because of grades?
oh yeah, my grades were terrible. I wasn't
Uh-huh.
doing my
You
homework.
weren't you
It,
weren't sticking to it.
no, not at all. And there was really no reason for it. I just didn't want to do the work, didn't turn assignments in, and so my dad told me when I went off to college, he's like, don't pull the same crap you pulled in high school, or you're gonna be right here at home. And I was like, that's never gonna happen. It'll be fine. And so I go off to college. Now I got to, I picked my grades up. I got a full scholarship for college.
Went
I
to
was studying
Howard.
chemical engineering, Howard University. But here's the thing. I hated chemistry. The only reason I was in chemical engineering is because I read an article that said, oh, chemical engineering is going to be the highest paid career of the next decade. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. Get to college, don't like chemistry, not going to class, not turning in assignments, and 2 semesters in, academic probation.
Oh boy.
And
Now
once again,
what year was this?
oh man, this is 2011.
Okay. Great.
Okay. So it's 2011. I
Academic
lose.
probation.
Oh man. And I did everything I could to hide the fact that I was on academic probation from my parents. Because I had convinced myself, I was Delulu, I had convinced myself that I was going to be able to somehow figure it out and talk my way into keep my scholarship, just like I had done in high school. So I went back up to the school my third semester, even though I knew I was on probation. They're like, no, Akeem, you're not just on probation. You've lost your scholarship. You're done. You got no money here. You got to pay full price if you want to stay. And man, and my parents didn't know a thing because I hid my school grades from them. I made sure that my teachers couldn't email them. I was sneaky. And I just couldn't face the failure. I couldn't face that I had lost this scholarship. And so I go back up to the school and I literally squatted in the dorm for a whole semester. I wasn't even supposed to be in the dorm, hadn't paid. No one at the school knew that I had lost my scholarship and that I was not going to class. And I literally just sat in the room. And I didn't know at the time, but I was facing severe depression and severe anxiety, staying up all night, sleeping all day. It was a very difficult time. Um, and eventually, the semester's coming to the end. I got to tell my parents, the school's like, we're not letting you in this dorm room next semester, just so you know. And I had to call them. It was right before Christmas. Called my parents and was like, I can't come back next semester. I haven't been to class all semester. Hardest phone call I ever had to make.
Hmm. So, so is it safe to say you didn't learn from your first mistake and you repeated it, or what do you think now?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. And you know what it was? I got away with very little pain, the first time around. I
Right.
lost it, but I went to the missions director and she just fixed it for me. So
Yeah.
I didn't face any consequences other than my
Yeah.
parents were upset for a week, but since I got my scholarship, they didn't have too much to be upset about. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't learn my lesson the first time, so I had to learn it again. And the second time it was a much harder lesson.
So what did your parents say when you told them around Christmas?
Ooh, well, on the phone, they were nice because I think they were afraid that I was suicidal or something because they were real nice on the phone. But when I got back home, oh, they let me have it. They were pissed, but they were mostly disappointed because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even ask for help. I didn't call to ask them to make a phone call. They're like, we could have tried to talk to admissions. We could have tried to get you other scholarship. We knew some people that worked at the university. They're like, we could have done so many things and you didn't ask anyone for help and you just were on your own. And growing up an only child, I never wanted to disappoint my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like a total disappointment and failure. And so I hid that failure. And I had to learn through that experience that that was not the right move to make.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, pride is something that we all
Mm,
have, but you also said that you didn't realize that you were in a Great Depression, right?
yes. Like I didn't necessarily have the words for it at the time.
Yeah.
It's 2011. It wasn't quite as trendy as it is now to like focus on mental health. So I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just knew that I was, not in it. And I just remember like it was like I was in a daze because I felt so bad every single day. But I didn't tell anybody and I didn't want anyone to know. So when I walked out the door of my dorm room, I put on a big smile, act like nothing was wrong, like I've been in class. I didn't say anything to anyone. And so I think the fact that I bottled it up and didn't let anyone in, it made it, 100 times worse than
Yeah.
if I had have asked for some help.
Yeah. So you came home in Christmas
Hmm.
2011,
Yeah.
and Santa probably put coal in your stocking or something like that.
I didn't get nothing.
He didn't even give you coal, huh? Oh
I
my
didn't
gosh, boy,
get nothing. Ooh, I
you
got
were
told to go get a job.
you were on the naughty list all the way around.
I was on big naughty list.
So what did you do?
So, I came home. My parents are like, look, you need to get back in school and you need to get a job. And so I enrolled in community college and I got a job. And I started working in a retail store, retail cell phone shop, Sprint, which is now T-Mobile. And so I always loved phones, right? I was a big tech nerd. And so now I was working in a shop. I was going to get a brand new, nice high-end phone for the first time in my life. So I was like, okay, it's not so bad. And I started doing sales. And I was really good at it. And I had always been the kid that, sold all the stuff to win the competition at school. Like, so I knew I had that talent, but being in the workplace and really being able to exercise that capability, it was the first for me. And so I started doing really well and I get promoted. I'm becoming what they call the key holder, which is like a manager. And things are going pretty well. But I'm still living at home. I'm probably making a little bit of money, but I had made myself this promise. When I got home, I said, by the time my friends graduate high school, I want to be making as much as the average college graduate. And I think at the time it was about 40, 35, $40,000. And I wasn't quite there yet. It was like at $38,000. So I'm like, I got some ways to go. And then comes an opportunity from a former manager of mine who said, hey, I'm at Verizon in a call center and I'm a manager and we're paying these people crazy money. And if you come here, you'll make two, maybe three times what you're making now. I said, what? So I quit my job against my parents' advice because they're like, you've already failed. You can't quit a job that you getting promoted at. You can't do that. I said, no, I got to go. And so I go work in for Verizon, the call center is one of the best decisions I ever made because I instantly doubled the amount of money I was making. And all of a sudden, I'm making big, big commission checks. And not only am I making the big commission checks, but it turns out they had this big contest that they were going to have called Verizon Rockstar. And this contest was a pitch competition to pitch Verizon's family of services, who could pitch it the best. And so I enter the competition and I win in my small group. I win at the conference level, the regional level, and I get to the finals. And they fly all the finalists down to Miami, Florida, to the Fountain Blue Hotel, one of the most fabulous hotels in all of Miami Beach, and they have all this signage everywhere. It says Rockstar, Verizon logos are everywhere. And they had this brilliant concept where they would have all the Verizon employees who were there to watch, all these executives, they would have to get autographs from the people competing in the competition. So people are running up to me in the hotel asking me for my autograph. There's signs that say Verizon Rockstar. So all the guests at the hotel think I'm a celebrity. And I would go on to win this entire competition. And when I tell you, Michael, it was like I finally felt I've recovered. This was about 3 years after leaving school. And for the first time, I felt comfortable enough to call up my high school friends and tell them, hey, I'm not in school anymore. I had to drop out. I lost my scholarship. But look at me now. Look what I've accomplished. And it really showed me that, is when you fail, as long as you don't give up, you have the opportunity to level up. And I felt like I had actually leveled up and was feeling really confident and on a high at that point in my life.
So, where was your depression in all this by the time that 3 years in the contest was over?
So, you know, at the time I thought it had disappeared, right? I wasn't feeling anything. I was feeling great. I felt like I recovered. I'm like, oh, I'm doing great. It's all good now. But it wasn't true. See, this was in summertime. I want to say 2014.
Mm-hmm.
It was in summertime. Then comes Thanksgiving. Mom was out of town. Had Thanksgiving with my dad, and then I was house sitting for my uncle, about an hour and a half away from where I live. And so I'm in the house all alone, not in my own home, Thanksgiving night, and I'm watching a movie, and Liam Neeson comes on. And he's like, when you die, it's not your life that flashes before your eyes, but it's remembering all the regrets that you have. And this overwhelming sense of anxiety just cuts into my gut. And I have this massive panic attack. And I get really tight, and my stomach starts to get shredded. And I'm starting to freak out because I haven't felt this way ever. It was the worst, most excruciating stomach pain I'd ever felt. And I didn't know exactly what was happening. I didn't even call it anxiety when it first started, but it went on for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And eventually I'm like, I think maybe I'm having anxiety. And so eventually, I'm trying to go to sleep. And as I was having trouble falling asleep, I told myself, I used to have zero sympathy for people who committed suicide. I used to think, how could someone commit suicide? How could they do that to their family? But in this moment, feeling this feeling, I was like, you know what? This has been going on for 3 hours. If this was going on for 3 years, 30 years, I may kill myself too, because this is hard. So I wake up the next morning and I'm like, I'm fine. I'm like, wow, that was weird. Won't be watching any more Liam Neeson movies, I'll tell you that much. Uh, and I think I'm okay. And about 30 seconds after I wake up, boom, it hits me again. Massive anxiety. And it goes on the next day and the next day, every single day, gut wrenching pain in my stomach all day long. This goes on for a week. Eventually, I can't sleep anymore. I remember I probably stayed up 4 or 5 days straight, no sleep, not 1 hour, not 30 minutes, 10, nothing. And I was terrified because I had never, even when I lost my scholarship, I had never experienced something like this. And I didn't know what it was. I was financially stable. I was feeling good about my life. I didn't know what was wrong. I knew I was just in denial. And I go to work, and my boss, who was a friend of mine, but at this point was like, Keem, you're not hitting your numbers. You're the rock star. Like, what's going on? You're off. And I said, dude, I just have not been feeling good. I've been sleeping. And he's like, you need to go see my therapist. And he had just went through a mental episode of his own. And I had never seen a therapist. And if you grow up in a black family in America, most black families like, you don't need a therapist. You go to church. If they don't say go to church, then like, listen, you just man up. You'll be fine. You don't need a therapist. And so, I was just like, I don't know, Curtis. He's like, no, you need to go see a therapist. So he gives me the number. I call her up. I go see her. And I talked to her. I'm like, oh, I just think I'm stressed at work. I just need some time off and I'll be fine. If you write me a note, I'll register for family medical leave and I'll be fine. Just some work stress. And at the very end, I'm like, and by the way, I think I'm gay, but no one knows, but it's not really a big deal. That's not why I'm here. It's really the work is the problem. And she's like, oh, okay. So I leave, anxiety every single day. Curtis again is like, Akeem, you need to go back to the therapist. You are not okay. And so I go back and I see her again. Curtis, my boss, had written me a note saying, no, you got to go. You can't, your head's not in the game. And so I go see the therapist again. And she's like, so do you want to talk for real this time?
Nothing like
And
somebody
this
who
time
talks directly to you and doesn't mince words.
Oh, not at all. And she was a older Christian woman, and that scared me because I grew up, grandfather was a Christian minister, grew up in a Christian family. I'm like, if I tell this woman I'm gay, she's probably gonna say I can't even come see her anymore. And so I talked to her again, and she's like, there was something you talked about at the end of our last session, and you blew over it like it didn't even matter. And so I talked to her and really just poured my heart. I was like, yeah, I've been dealing with this my entire life. I figured I'm already black in America. I don't want to be gay too. I don't need a secondary burden. And she's like, you got to be who you are. And your brain and your body is telling you that if you don't, it's shutting you down, as you've clearly witnessed. And so, having her be so accepting of me and telling me that it's okay to be just who I am. And I always had this big fear that if I came out to people, that people wouldn't like me. And I'm a salesperson, right? I'm a top salesperson. So I need people to like me. And, I always just had this big fear that people would treat me differently. And the fact that she treated me the same and treated me kindly and with compassion, it gave me hope that, maybe I've been wrong about this. And so I decided that day I'm going to come up to my parents. That's the first step. It's been 22 years. I can't wait any longer. And so I had to go in order to get when you're in a union shop, and in order to get full pay when you're on medical leave, you have to go to a hospital. You got to get a doctor's certified note, not just a therapist if it's a mental health issue. So I go to the mental hospital. They check me in, and I tell them, hey, look, I think this is my problem. I'm gonna come out to my parents today. By the way, it's my dad's birthday. Probably going to be a shit show, but it's been too long and I gotta get it off my chest. And I remember the nurse, and she's writing me all these prescriptions, one for the anxiety, one for the depression, one for mood stabilizers. She's like, I don't know if it's a good idea for you to tell your dad that today on his birthday. Can't you just wait until tomorrow? And I said, no, I cannot. Don't put off tomorrow what you can do today. And so I went home terrified. My father's birthday. We're having cake and ice cream. And I remember right before I worked up the courage to say something, my dad was watching James Corden on TV. And he's like, I think James Corden is really funny. I like carpool karaoke. He's like, but I don't understand something. Why does he act so gay? He's married. And I'm like, oh God, this is gonna be a disaster. My parents are gonna disown me. This is gonna be terrible. But eventually I muster up the courage and say, guys, you remember when I called you from college and had a very difficult conversation? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, this is gonna be another one of those conversations. And so I tell them, and my mom's crying, and my dad's got the look of disappointment on his face. And even though I could tell like it was gonna be a long road, and it was a long road, the first thing my dad said was, I always told your mother you were probably gay. And Liddy's like, I just don't understand why you decided to go tell a therapist before you told us.
There you go.
And and for someone from his generation, that was about as accepting of a moment as I could have wished for. And over the course of the next few years, we built a much stronger relationship and have become closer than ever. And it was just another one of those things where here I was, hadn't learned this lesson of don't go it alone. Don't bottle up your emotions. It doesn't work that way. Your body will shut you down. When you put all of that stress, that emotional stress on your body and you block your creativity and your capability, your body just gives up. Your brain, your heart says enough is enough. And so once again, I was surprised by the acceptingness, and not just my parents, but when I told my friends, when I told acquaintances, when I told people in the workplace, it just lifted a burden and it opened up my mind to be able to focus on other things because I had spent so many years using half of my energy to pretend to be someone I wasn't so that people wouldn't know the truth.
Did you know you were gay, or did it take you a long time to really figure that out?
Oh no, I knew. I knew
Ah,
from when I was like eighth grade, but I buried it deep. I said, no, I'm not gonna do that. Because
okay.
I grew up thinking that, you're going to hell if you're gay.
Yeah.
Point
Hmm.
blank, period. It's the most evil thing you can be. And ultimately, that upbringing combined with that breakthrough would lead me to the spiritual awakening that I needed to ultimately break through from all of those drugs and mood stabilizers and stuff that they had prescribed me.
So now at this time, you were still working at Verizon?
Correct.
Uh huh. All right. And so what year was this now when all this happened?
So I want to say this is 20, we're now moving into 2015
Okay,
going
that's
into
what I
the
thought.
next year.
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of wanted to go through all of this because I know where we're headed with it, but I think this is very important for people to hear. What did you then do?
So, here I was, I had come back to work, but I'm on all these different pills. Um, and I'm feeling better, but I'm also feeling kind of numb.
Mm.
I'm not having anxiety and depression, but I'm not having excitement and elation either, right? It's just very even tone. And I didn't quite pick up on it right away. But I remember one time I forgot to take my medicine, particularly one of the mood stabilizers before I went to work, and I started having massive anxiety at work. And I went back home and I took it. And that's when I first started to realize it's like, oh my gosh, I think my body has become dependent on these
On the
drugs
drugs,
in
yeah.
order to stabilize my mood and to not have these feelings because here I am addressing a lot of concerns, but I'm still not in a good place. And so, fast forward a couple months, and it's the end of the fiscal year, and they have a big award ceremony for the people who are like the top 1% of the company, and I was one of them. And typically we get to go on a big trip and very lavish, but since our division was going to be sold off to another company, instead we just got a check. And so they come around with a big check. I want to say it was like $15,000. It's a huge check. And they come to my desk, got the confetti cannon, people are cheering, they give me the check, done. And this girl was sitting beside me, Brittany. And now Brittany was always a problem, okay? She was always tattletale, always causing me issues. And Brittany looks at me with an attitude and she goes, You don't look like somebody that just got $15,000. You not even smiling. And at first I was like, Brittany, don't talk to me. But then I was like, oh, wait, I think Brittany is right. Something's still wrong. How is it that this has happened to me? 4 years ago, I was broke. And now I'm getting a $15,000 check and I'm not even smiling. Something's wrong. And that night, I was like, I got to stop taking these drugs. And I'm not having, listen, people who are prescribed medicine by their doctor, I'm not saying they shouldn't take it, but I knew that for me, I was running away from these emotions that I needed to have. And I was slowly overcoming a lot of the things that were causing the emotions. But as long as I was taking the drugs, I couldn't have any additional breakthroughs of what it was that was causing me this discomfort inside. I had basically turned down my alarm system that was really awakening me to the fact that something was wrong. And so I quit cold turkey, which I do not advise. And when I tell you I had so much anxiety and depression flood in, oh my gosh, it was horrible. And I was like, oh, this is what happens when people stop taking drugs. It's hard. And man, that night was just it was one of the scariest nights of my life, but it ended up also being the most profound. Because that night I was in so much agony. I was like, I need something. I'm not gonna take these drugs, but I need something. So I called my buddy up. I said, yo, bro, let me get a joint. I need some weed or something. Like I'm freaking out over here. And that was like the worst thing I could do because then the weed caused you to have even more anxiety. And so I'm sitting there that night and I'm just freaking out and I'm just having this crisis. Like, what am I doing with my life? What's happening? Our division's getting ready to shut down. And I end up having this profound spiritual experience where my uncle had given me a book about angels. I hadn't read the book, but I read the back cover and it talked about how angels weren't these floating people in the sky with wings, but instead they were signs from God, from the universe. And they could be as simple as a song on the radio or your lights flickering. It could be just something to show you what it is you need to do next. And that night and all that anxiety as I'm pacing around my apartment, every light in my entire apartment shuts off. Pitch black. I'm looking around. I'm like, did the power go out? I look out the window. Everyone else's power is on. I see my PlayStation. Its little light is on. I go to the switch. I flick it off. It's now off, but it was on. Then I flick it back on. All the lights come back on. I freak out. And I'm like, what is happening? And that night I ended up having this spiritual moment where I felt like for the first time I heard God's voice speaking to me. And that voice said to me, you hate me because you think I hate you, but you never asked me what I think. And it lifted this burden that was still there from childhood. That yes, I had come out and I was moving through life and people were accepting me, but I still felt deep inside like, well, they say God hates me. And I don't like that. And in that moment, I think finally that burden fully lifted off of me. And it allowed me to not just be free of that, but it then gave me the capability to go in and really search my spirituality. So I start reading all these books and I start hearing about the law of attraction. I'd never heard of this thing, law of attraction, before. And I hear about an abundance mindset. And I start learning about meditation and what meditation can do for you. And I tried all these things because I was coming off of being dependent on all these mood stabilizers and lithium and all this stuff. And so I needed something else to replace it. And it came for me from doing meditation, practicing yoga, going for walks with my dog. And man, it just opened my eyes. I start reading books like Think and Grow Rich. And all of a sudden, like I'm realizing not only was I bothered by the fact that I wasn't being true to myself in my sexuality, but I wasn't being true to myself in terms of my dreams and aspirations because I wanted to be more than a salesperson. And being a salesperson was no longer enough for me. And so it was with that feeling and emotion that I quit Verizon before we merged into the new company. And I decided to go and start a business. But I was terrified. I was terrified. I wanted to start a cooking business. I invested a little bit of my savings into it. I saved up quite a bit of money over the years. And but I just wasn't there yet. Mentally, I was not prepared to truly believe in myself. And so, after about 6 months of doing some part-time work on a political campaign, this is 2016, doing some part-time work on a political campaign, I get a phone call from Square, the people that make Cash App. And they're like, hey, we're opening up an office. You're a top salesperson. Come work for us. And I'd always wanted to work for a tech company. And so instead of pursuing my dreams and my career, I was afraid. And so I said, no, let me go do what's safe. And I went and go work for Square. But it was one of the best decisions I ever made because I got to work with entrepreneurs every day. And every time I would work with an entrepreneur and see what they were able to accomplish, more and more it gave me the confidence in myself that I could do it. And I got to be a part of an organization that really treated employees well and showed me what it was like to grow and scale a business. But ultimately, that same feeling came back of I'm not satisfied in my life. That anxiety starts to creep in, that depression starts to seep in. I'm not satisfied with where I'm at anymore. And ultimately, I end up quitting again. So this is now the third job I've quit. I end up quitting again. And I'm like, I'm going to start a business. And luckily, that time I quit, my boss gave me a book called The Alchemist. And that book would go on to change my life.
Tell us about that.
So, I get this book, The Alchemist, and I said it changed my life. But the truth is that when he gave it to me, I'm like, Tom doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not reading this book. I just threw it down. I was not had no intentions to read it. Just like I didn't read the book about the angels, I wasn't gonna read this book either. And as time goes on, this book starts creeping into my life. My mom sent me a video. She didn't know I had quit this job. I stopped telling my parents because they would freak out every time I quit. So she sent me an article, a YouTube video of Oprah. And Oprah's interviewing super music producer Pharrell. And she's like, Pharrell, you just wrote Happy. It's number one on the billboards. You've helped so many artists become number one billboard chart toppers. Can you just tell our audience about one book, the one book that changed your life? And she's like, Oprah, the one book that changed my life was The Alchemist. And I was like, oh, that's the book Tom gave me. I should read the book. I grabbed the book, I open it up, and I'm like, I'll read it tomorrow. So I don't read the book. Then a couple weeks later, it's at the top of the Amazon charts. Then a couple weeks later, it's at the top of New York Times bestseller list. Now, this is a 30, 40-year-old book. Like, why are people still talking about this book? Now, you would have thought with all those signs, I would have realized probably should read this book. I hadn't read it. So then I ended up moving to a new apartment. I had stuff everywhere, boxes everywhere. And my buddy was helping me move. And on my kitchen island, through all the junk, I see a book. Now, my boss had given me this copy of The Alchemist. It was hardback, beautiful textures, had illustrations inside. Had a sleeve on it. It was like a limited edition book. It was really nice. The book on my counter was not that. Okay, it was tattered. It was paperback. It had a $2.99 discount sticker on it, but it was The Alchemist. And I look at it and I start freaking out. And I had that same feeling I had that night when I stopped taking the drugs and I had this spiritual experience. And I'm like nervous because how in the world did this book get in my apartment? It's not the book my boss gave me. Have I owned this book my entire life? How long has this book been with me and I didn't know it? I had never heard of this book before. And I was so shooken by the fact that this book was in my house that I sat down and read it cover to cover. And The Alchemist, for those who don't know, is about a boy who has a dream about a treasure in Egypt, and he decides to pursue that dream. And early on in his journey, he meets a wise man that tells him that if he just follows the omens or the signs, that he will find his treasure. And I realized as I read the book, I'm like, oh, not only is this book about omens and signs to follow your dreams, the book itself was an omen and sign for me to follow my dreams. And after I read this book, my mindset was fixated on me finding what I was truly passionate about and the ideas and the people that would lead me to live the life and to become the person that I always wanted to be. And it was with that mindset, I get a phone call from my uncle, who's an engineer at NASA. He's telling me about a project he's working on for the Space Launch System. And he was going to use this adhesive that NASA had invented back in the 70s that was based off the feet of geckos to do his project. And since I had just moved and mounted my TV on the wall, I kept thinking if I just had this adhesive, I could have saved myself a lot of time and energy by sticking my TV on the wall. And while I never stuck a TV to the wall, we did figure out a way to stick a tiny TV, a cell phone, to a wall. And that's where the idea for the Flipstik was born. A little device that goes on the back of your phone that allows you to mount your phone to a wall like a TV, but also allows you to mount it to be able to take selfies, to take pictures, to make TikTok videos, all completely hands-free with a washable, reusable, non-toxic adhesive. And that journey of Flipstik just, man, that's when it really got crazy.
So what basically happened? You created it, and that's pretty cool. Um, but you have to do something with it.
Yeah, listen, that is so powerful, Michael, because so many people have ideas, right? How many of us have sat in front of the TV, we see something pop on, we say, oh, I had that idea. But I'm a believer that ideas flow through the universe and it's touching a lot of people are having the same idea at the same time, but only one or two will actually act on it. And because I had read The Alchemist and I had realized like you got to take action when you see the signs, I took it. So I start doing research. I create a prototype. I send it off to China. I'm like, okay, I should probably get a patent. I need trademarks. I get on YouTube. I figure out how to do a patent, how to do a trademark. I get everything registered. And I didn't want to spend my own money on getting it produced. So I went to Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a pre-order platform. And I actually set up pre-orders for the product, made a video and a web page. And I end up getting $15,000 in pre-orders to start this business. And from there, I wish I could tell you things took off, but that's not what happened. If you haven't gotten a hint of how my story goes, that's not what happened. Instead, what happens is after the $15,000, I get no sales, zero. Okay. I created a website. I would get one or two sales a month, and my product's only $10. So as you can imagine, I'm bleeding through my savings. But I had to rely on what I had already learned, right? I didn't really know Facebook marketing very well. I couldn't do ads. I wasn't a social media star. But what I did know was in-person sales. So I meet a couple of guys. They say, hey, if you want help, we'll help you. And we decide to break into a festival and walk around and just pitch people this little idea called a Flipstik. And that first day, we made $100. And the second day, we went back again. We made $130. And then we're like, we got to find another festival, but this time we'll actually pay to be at the festival. That next festival, we made like 400, then 500. Then I was like, okay, well, how do we have a festival every day where I can sell in person? The answer was the mall. Now, this is 2018. No one would have advised you to go and set up a booth in the mall, but it's all I
Mhm.
knew. And so I had to lean into what my expertise was. Since I didn't have a lot of funding, I didn't have a lot of connections, I just had to rely on my own understanding. And I wish I could say I just went in like a bull in a china shop to the mall, but I didn't. I had a panic attack. And I was terrified because the mall rent was, they quoted me $7,000. And
Yeah.
I've only made like 16 grand in the lifetime of the business. And they wanted 7 grand for 2 months. And I literally, Michael, I had to have my mom walk with me into the office at the mall to sign the lease paperwork. And she talked them into giving it to me for only $5,000. She's like, my son has a business and he wants to do this, but he's afraid to do this because it's so expensive. And if you give him a discount, I promise he'll pay you. I felt like a little kid. But you know what? I needed it because I was so afraid to take that next step. It was a big step, it was a big risk and a big investment that had to be made. And I'm so grateful that my parents, and particularly my mother, was like, look, you can do this and you got to go for it. You just have to do it. And you can't let fear stop you from chasing after your dreams. And that's exactly what they talked about in The Alchemist. There were
Mhm.
so many times where the boy got stuck and wasn't moving forward, and he had to face his fears to take the next step and go further. And I was at one of those points in my life, and man, I'm so glad my mom did that, because in those 2 months that we were at the mall, we made $30,000. 2 months. Brand new business, a $10 item.
So
And after that,
why did that happen? What was it about the Flipstik that made so many people buy it, or what did you do that made so many people feel that they should buy it?
I was desperate. I had to make it work. I had no choice. So when I got into the mall, I come in, I owe 2,500 bucks to the mall right away. So I got to make this money back that I've put on my credit card. And so literally every single person that walked by, have you heard about Flipstik? Have you heard about Flipstik? And I would show them, I put it on their phone, I'd stick it to a wall, I'd show them what it could do. And I just leaned on what I knew, right? I asked questions, right? I uncovered problems that they had. And then I presented the Flipstik as a solution to those problems. And so I said, hey, do you take pictures? Sometimes we have to ask someone to take a picture on vacation. Well, when you go on your vacation, you're in Europe, you don't want somebody running away with your phone and stealing your phone. You need a Flipstik. You can stick it to the wall, take the picture of you and your family yourself. So I kept coming up with all these solutions for people after I got them to stop and listen for a second. And slowly but surely, they started buying. And the thing is, some people bought it because they really love the Flipstik. But to be honest, a lot of them bought it because they admired that I was out here hustling, trying to make something happen. And they just wanted to be a part of the story. They're like, I don't even want the Flipstik, but I want to see you succeed. You're working really hard and I want to help you. So I'll take 5 of them. I'm going to make them stocking stuffers.
Oh.
And it was just, man, it was just so much love and support from people who just wanted to see me succeed.
So in 2 months, you made $30,000, and that's pretty cool, but still, that's not a lot as far as growing a company. So what did you then do?
So then I had to figure out what was next, right? And
Right.
I knew I was working 12-hour days at the mall, right? $15,000 a month ain't bad, but I can't do that forever. Those are long, hard hours.
Yeah.
So I decided I want to be on Shark Tank. I'm like, I need an investor. I need someone to come in and really turn this into a company. So I go to Vegas to CES, Consumer Electronics Show. I apply to be on Shark Tank. I get through the first round. 40,000 people apply for Shark Tank every year. And I got past the first round to the second, to the third, to the fourth. It gets down from 40,000 people down to the final 200. And they're going to select 120 people out of the final 200 to actually film. And I just knew. I'm like, I've been following the omens. I've been listening to the signs. They love my pitch. I'm going to be on Shark Tank. This is 2019. I just knew it. I felt so confident. And they called me and they're like, Akeem, you're not going to be on Shark Tank.
Why?
And I was so sad. I remember exactly where I was. I was on the sidewalk. I can point you to the square. I was hurt because I put all my eggs in one basket and I didn't know
Yeah.
what to do next. But just like in the past, when I faced rejection and failure, I knew I couldn't give up. So I gave myself a week to cry and to be upset. And then I said, I got to find someone else. If I can't have a shark as my celebrity investor, I'll find someone else. And it just so happened, it's a long story. I'm really shortening it down. But it through a series of events, I end up uncovering that there is an event called the Revolt Summit. And this was an event that was being thrown by billionaire rapper Sean Diddy Combs. And it was an event for people who were interested in getting into the music industry. But they were going to have a pitch competition for businesses. So I said, great, I'll go, I'll pitch my business, and I'll get an investment. So I buy the tickets, get the airline tickets, rental car, all that stuff. It was in Atlanta. And I find out the pitch competition's closed. But the tickets are refundable. So your boy had to figure something out. Turns out there was a music competition. And I said, well, I don't want a record deal, but I took music appreciation. I was in jazz lab band. I'll just write a rap and pitch my business in the rap. Now, I don't think you would get an A if you told your teacher that's your business plan, but it was all I had. It's what I went and did. And to be honest, I didn't tell anyone about the plan because I understand that if I told someone, it sounds ridiculous and it
Yeah.
sounds far-fetched. But I believed in myself. And my mentality at that time, my mindset, I was meditating, I was believing in law of attraction. I said, I'm going to make this happen for me. I'm meant to be here. There's all the signs are pointing that I need to go here.
So
So I
what did you
write my
do?
rap. I write the rap. I go to Atlanta. I do the rap. They love it. I get to the top 5 people. I'm going to be able to get on stage in front of DJ Khaled, in front of Diddy, and all these music producers. And I get disqualified from the competition because they say, "You're not a real rapper, Akeem. You don't want a record deal. You want a business deal." I said, "What's the difference?" They thought there was a difference. They disagreed. So they're like, "You're not gonna get on stage. You're not gonna be able to rap in front of the celebrities. You're done." But my mindset was one that says, "No, I'm not done. I'm here for a reason, and I'm gonna make it happen." So during the comedy show, which was right before the final music competition, I stand up, I hold my products up in the air, and the comedian looks at me, and he must have sensed the desperation in my persona because he's like, "Man, bro, what are you trying to sell me?" And I go full pitch mode. I tell him what it does, where he can stick it, how he can take TikTok videos and watch TV, and he starts making jokes, and he's making very lewd jokes about where you can stick the Flipstik, and the crowd is laughing, and the whole show ends up derailed because now everyone wants to come up to the stage and talk about their business. And eventually he invites me. This is DC Young Flies, the comedian. He's a pretty large comedian, and he invites me on stage, and he lets me do my rap during his set. And the crowd goes nuts. And the same woman who disqualified me from the music competition whisks me up, takes me backstage. I get to meet Diddy and DJ Khaled, and I'm meeting the CEO of all the companies and the sponsor executives. AT&T was the sponsor. I make a phone accessory. This amazing experience happens, and ultimately, they would invite me out to Los Angeles. They'd buy a ton of Flipstiks to give away. And in LA, I did the same thing again, but this time it was Snoop Dogg on the stage. And Snoop Dogg ends up loving the Flipstik. And between Snoop Dogg and Diddy and Revolt Summit, they call a few people, and a producer from Shark Tank calls me up and says, "Hey, we want you on the show." And that's how I was able to get on Shark Tank. And that was a transformative moment for our business and is what really
Of
propelled
course.
us to 7 figures and beyond.
So you went on Shark Tank, you made your presentation, and did any of them go along and decide that they would invest or consider investing?
So actually, we got 2 offers. One from Mr. Wonderful right out the gate, and
There
it
you
wasn't a
go.
Sharky. It wasn't actually a Sharky offer. I thought he was going to hit me with, I want 89% of your company, and I want 75 cents royalty in perpetuity
Yeah.
forever throughout the universe. But he actually gave me exactly what I asked for. But I went to Shark Tank for Lori. That's who I wanted, and I was committed to it. And eventually, Mr. Wonderful realized that, and he got very upset. And he was like, "When Mr. Wonderful gives you an offer, you take it. Now I'm out." So then I had to go with Lori. And luckily, she realized that I really wanted to work with her. I had read her book prior to going. I knew exactly the language in which to speak with her. And she ended up giving me an offer on the show. It was $100,000 for 25% of my
Mm.
business. So a
Hmm.
$400,000 valuation on my business.
Yeah.
And I left the Shark Tank. I was so excited and just knew the future was bright. And as this is 2020 now, it's pandemic time. If I hadn't gone on Shark Tank, I probably would have went out of business in 2020 because
Sure.
we couldn't be in the mall. Online wasn't working. But luckily, we were on Shark Tank, and as it was leading up to getting on air, I realized that the deal had changed, and the deal that I was offering the tank was not going to be the deal that I was going to be able to close. And even as much as I wanted to work with Lori, it no longer felt like the right move to make. And
Hmm.
I leaned back on my gut feelings and the feelings I'd have in the past when I had made decisions about my business that were mistakes, and I felt that same way. And so I listened to that gut feeling and said, you know what, Lori, I'm a big fan and I wanted to work with you, but I just don't think this is the deal I want to take. And she was okay with it, and we both decided not to move forward. But when we aired on Shark Tank, I didn't have any money. I
Mm-hmm.
needed to produce product. And just the timing of everything was magical because I had just entered into a pitch competition, won the pitch competition, but hadn't received the money yet. So I had to call up the people and be like, hey, I didn't tell you this, but I'm gonna be on Shark Tank in 10 days. I need the money now. And they wired it to me, and I got ready for Shark Tank. And we bought all this inventory. I get a warehouse. I set everything up. We have a watch party. And it's 2020. It's like November, I want to say November 7th. And if you remember 2020, first week of November, it was election week.
Yeah.
And they preempted the episode by 2 hours. They pushed it back to do election coverage. I'm like, oh, I don't care who the president is going to be. No one knew who the president was yet. I said, I just want my episode on Shark Tank to air. And so they pushed it back by 2 hours, and I was nervous, but I said, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to work out. I know the omens. I know I didn't read The Alchemist for nothing. There's no way that I got on Shark Tank and the universe, that God is going to take this away from me. No way. So the episode comes on, and they say right before the episode, hey, if there's an announcement and we find out there's some big news, we're going to preempt Shark Tank. Episode comes on. Everything's going smoothly. All the people are going through. Turns out I'm the last person on the episode. It comes out. The same rap I did for Diddy, they had me do on Shark Tank. So I come out, I'm rapping. Everyone's excited. People are cheering. We're just so excited. I'm on national television. I was a college dropout a few years ago. Now I'm on national television. And right as I get into the meat of my pitch, about 2 minutes in, we interrupt this regularly scheduled programming to bring you a
Right.
message from Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Heart sank to the floor. I couldn't believe it. I was devastated. It was the hardest night of my life
So what happened?
because after all of this work and all of this effort, it felt like it got taken away from me. It felt
Mm-hmm.
so unfair. But what would end up happening is I kept that mindset. It's not over. This is not the end. I can make something of this. And for the first time in the history of Shark Tank, they re-aired an episode. I called the executive producer. I said this wasn't fair. He said, hey, you signed a waiver that says you knew this could happen. I said, I know, but it's just not fair. And he decided to re-air the episode. And so not only did we air the first time, and people bought Flipstiks the first time because they wanted to know what happened. Why did he get cut off? But then they bought it the second time. And in that first airing, even though it got preempted, people only saw the first, 120 seconds of my pitch. We still sold more in the next 24 hours than we had sold in the past 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it just changed the trajectory of the entire business. And I'll fast forward a little bit through this just so we can, get to any other things you want to talk about. But we would end up going on to get into Target and Best Buy, AT&T, T-Mobile. I would raise capital from investors, raise over 7 figures from investors. They would help propel the business even further. We get on the Today Show. QVC Home Shopping Network was always a dream of mine to get on. I thought that dream was going to be dead because I didn't close my deal with Lori, who's the queen of QVC.
Yeah.
But even still, I get on QVC multiple times. We're doing 6-figure sales in 8 minutes. I mean, it was just this incredible journey of explosive growth. It got us this award from Inc. magazine. We were one of the top 50 fastest growing consumer product brands. Through 2022. We got that award last year. And man, it's just been an absolute whirlwind of an experience, and one that I wouldn't trade for the world.
What a cool story. And I think one of the questions that I would ask is, okay, with all of that, you've had several challenges. Some you created yourself as you look back on it. Yeah, I can agree with me. What have you learned?
Definitely.
What have you learned?
Mm. Well, number one, look, never give up. Some things don't work out, right? And if you go after it with everything you got and it doesn't work out, it wasn't for you. But it doesn't mean give up. Continue to pursue your dreams and your passions. Keep going. Because as long as when you fail, you don't give up, you have the opportunity to level up. And as I continued to level up, that became more ingrained inside of me. Number two is don't bottle it up. Like, look, we're humans. We have emotions, we have anxieties and depressions. It's just human nature. You don't have to run from it or hide from it or pretend that it doesn't exist. Embrace it and understand that these are all seasons. Once you conquer one thing and you think you're okay, something else will come along and you will continue to evolve over the course of your life. You're never going to stop learning. So you're always going to face these walls. I learned something from a motivational speaker who I love, Jim Rohn, and he talked about how that imagine being a farmer and you just got plopped on this planet. It's the beginning of spring. You plant all these crops, they grow, you're making all this money. Everything is roses, it's summertime, it's fall, you're harvesting. It's amazing. And then winter hits. This is the first winter you've ever experienced, and it's horrible. Nothing grows, ground's frozen solid. You're not making any money. You think you're going to starve to death. And he's like, but here's the thing every farmer knows that after winter comes
Spring.
spring. And so many of us move through our lives thinking that the winter is the end. We're going to be in winter for the rest of our lives. And the sad truth is, a lot of us spend our entire lives in that winter. And
Yeah.
I learned, and I want everyone to understand that look, winter will come after fall, it will happen. But after winter comes spring if you choose for it to be. And so every time I hit a winter now, I hit a spring and I get prepared for the next chapter of my life and understand that, hey, this is just a season and it's a roller coaster ride. It's up and it's down, but the momentum that got me to the bottom of the hill will carry me back up to the top of the next.
So, what do your parents think about all this?
Oh man, let me so even up until a couple years ago, my mom's like, "Well, when are you gonna go back to school?" So I remember this is summer last year, and I say, "Hey, mom, we need to go back up. We need to go to Washington D.C. In June for something." And she's like, "Well, what's going on?" I said, "We got to go." I was like, I got something going on, event, a gala in D.C." And in summer of last year, I go back up to Washington, D.C., which is where Howard University is, right? I get there, I'm walking back on my old campus where I had the biggest failure of my life, something that I thought I could never recover from. But this time, I was in Washington, D.C., because the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History had heard my story and saw my product, and they were running an exhibit on the history of cell phones. And they wanted to put my story and my product in that exhibit. And I got to take my mother into the halls of the Smithsonian, and we're sitting next to the woman that created text messages. Okay. And we're sitting next to the man who runs Qualcomm, who makes all the chips in every cell phone you've ever bought. And then there's me. And I'm like, I think I'm at the wrong table. But to see the beaming smile on my mom's face, she wouldn't stop talking to people. I'm like, Mom, you have got to stop talking to these folks. Okay. Everybody don't want to talk to you. But man, the pride that she had on her face, it was a miracle. Because how is it that, you know, 15 years, 15 some odd years, coming up 14 years after this massive failure in this city that meant so much to me, here I am back again and I'm on
Yeah.
top of the world. It was incredible. And it was just so special. I got to take my mother and my father, and they got to see their son back in this city where they had to come and pick up all his stuff and take all of his stuff from college, leaving in shame. And here we were back again. But this time, you know, we're sitting with some titans of industry and me because people just happen to like my story and they thought for the kids that came to see this exhibit, everyone's not going to be the inventor of 3G, right? Or the inventor of a cell phone screen or radio towers or radio signals. Everyone's not going to be that. But a Flipstik, you could do that. That's possible. And so they put my story in here with all of these incredible individuals. And it was just it man, it made me feel really good and it made my parents so proud.
Well, and that's pretty cool. So your dad got over all his disappointments as well.
He did. And I remember this was a few years later. He told me that night when I came out to him that they were disappointed. And that cut me so deep. And I remember years later, maybe like 3 or 4 years, I told him I wasn't feeling good one day. And I said, "Are you disappointed in me?" And he's like, "Why would you think I was disappointed in you?" And I was like, "Because you told me
Yeah, you
we're
said so.
disappointed." And he's like, "I'm not disappointed." I said, "Well, that's what you said." And he's like, "Son, I'm not disappointing you. I'm proud of you." This was right as I had started my business, Flipstik. We hadn't been on Shark Tank or any of that stuff yet. He was actually working for me for free in the mall on my day off. My parents would rotate between giving me and my two employees a day off in the mall because we were working such long hours and they worked for free. And I just asked him if he was disappointed. He was like, "Of course I'm not disappointed." And, I think sometimes for parents, they don't realize their kids absorb everything and we hear
Mm-hmm.
everything and we take
Mm-hmm.
everything so personally. And they, as a parent, I think you assume like, of course my kid knows I love him. I sacrificed everything for them to be here. But your insecurities creep in, and without reaffirming your kids, they don't know, even though you think they may. And so, yeah, I mean, he had gotten over that probably years before I knew he had, but it took a long time.
Well,
And I remember like one of the most special moments, sorry to interrupt, one of the most special moments for me was I remember my now fiance, we were at the house one time and we walked in the door and my father greeted him and his words was, "Hey, how's it going, son?"
there
And
you go.
man, it just meant so much to me. I literally came home and cried because it was really special.
So, are you going to go back to school?
You know what? I think one day I will, not for business, but after, I got a couple more things I want to do, but eventually I think I'll go back, but it'll be for a new chapter. It'll be
That's
when it's
okay.
time for me to enter in a new chapter. And I think for me, that chapter will be something to do with architecture because I
Okay.
love buildings, I love architecture. And now is not the time, but one day it will be. And I think at that point it'll be time for me to go back.
So, what is next for you right now?
So right now for me, now this is a heartbreaker, okay? So after all this success, right, with Flipstik, and we do all this stuff, we ink 5,000, we're making millions of dollars. There was a problem. And the problem is that every additional dollar we made was an additional dollar we lost because we weren't profitable. And no matter what we did, we weren't able to find profitability. And on top of that, we realized the market that we expected to be there, this casual creator market, was not nearly as big as we had imagined. And so after trying so many things, retail stores doing influencer marketing, paid marketing, promotional items, I had to, you know, talk to my investors and say, "Guys, you've invested your money, you've doubled down on your money, but we don't have a path forward unless we have a ton of more money invested into this business. We're at the end of the line. We don't know how we can make this a profitable business. The product is too inexpensive and it costs too much to market it." And so we had to just come to the realization that we're going to have to downsize the business. We're not going to be able to continue to invest in scaling up the company. And it's essentially as if we had shut it down. And it was one of the hardest decisions I had to make at the end of last year that this is where we were. I was devastated. because I felt like I had given up on this dream that had taken me so far. But here was the thing: as far as it had taken me, what I had noticed was over the past year, that same feeling that I felt when I quit my jobs and I left things and I started new things had come back. I
Mm.
was feeling that anxiety. I was
Anxiety.
feeling like as far as I had come, I felt like I had driven down the highway of life, but even still, I had parked. I had gone far, but I was parked in where I was. And no longer was I feeling the excitement and the joy and the strategy and all these things happen, even though we were trying everything. I remember I made a video for this huge influencer, a music video. We sent it to a huge talent agency, and I went to New York and I was trying all these things, and nothing was landing. And so when I finally decided, okay, we're not going to be able to make it work, we're out of money and we're out of time. And the investors were like, Akeem, it's okay. We did it. You did as much as you could. We all believed in you and we took it far. We took it really far. But you took it as far as you could. And the market has spoken. Sometimes that's how it happens. The market speaks. And so I had to decide, okay, if it can't be Flipstik and I have to do something else, which I have to do, what is it going to be? And I realized through this journey, I had the opportunity, just like today, to tell people my story, to tell people what it is I've learned, the strategies I use, the successes that I've had, and what it took and how it worked. And then I'm just a regular guy, and you can do this too. And I got so much joy and so much just fulfillment from seeing the light in people's eyes when they realize that they could chase after their dreams too. And so for me in 2024, while my focus won't be solely on Flipstik and pushing that even higher, it kind of reached its glass ceiling. I will continue to tell that story, and I will continue to create new stories as I enter the next chapter of my journey. And for me, that chapter is telling my story and motivating and inspiring people to become the best version of themselves. And a funny thing happened, Michael. As soon as I admitted to the world, like, hey, Flipstik isn't going to be $100 million. It may have gotten to 10 million, but it can't go any further. It's gotten as far as it'll get. When I started speaking and telling people my story and teaching, I realized like, oh wow, so many people that follow us on social media that bought the Flipstik, they have this assumption that we just blew up overnight. We were a Shark Tank and we were a viral success. They had no idea the troubles that happened. The difficulty was there, the obstacles that needed to be overcome. And as I started telling this story, after 5 years of making posts about how to make TikTok videos and how to use the Flipstik, no one ever personally reached out to me about my content. But 3 days into posting content about the journey, people started flooding in. Oh my gosh, listening to your stories helped me. This is incredible. I feel encouraged. And it showed me that, man, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I didn't realize at the time that it was what was meant to be. Like it's hard to believe that you go on a long journey, you create something, and then it doesn't live up to your dreams and expectations. But then I realized, like, man, my real true dream is to be the biggest motivational speaker in the world and to have millions of people hear my story and realize, man, if that guy could do it, I can definitely do it. Uh, and that's what I'm doing now. And I'm on the beginning part of that journey, but I'm very fortunate because it's not my first time. I've had to start over. I know what it's like to do something from nothing, but I also have that belief in myself and that knowing that whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish, whatever it is that I believe I'm supposed to do, I can do it. And that's what I'm doing now. When I tell you, Michael, a lot of stuff I can't talk about yet, but when I tell you the universe has conspired to make some magic happen for me, it's unbelievable. Tomorrow I have a call with literally the head of an entire sports league, not of a team, of the league. And all I did was send an email. It's just unbelievable. And so I'm so excited to be on this new journey. And don't get me wrong, November, December 2023, I was crushed. Okay. I was just sitting at home. I was so sad.
Well,
And I
but
think it's
you're
important to feel those. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, but you are moving forward, and I think that's the important thing. And clearly, whatever you put your mind to, you're going to have success doing. And I think that, that's what people need to hear from you today. And I think you've told it very well. We have been doing this for a while, and I'm going to have to go ahead and stop just because I think
We're
we've
over time.
well, we had a lot of fun doing it though, and maybe we need to do another one, and we can talk about that because I'd love to get you back on. And if you got more stories to tell, we should do it. But I want to thank you for being here and being a part of Unstoppable Mindset. And you clearly have one, an unstoppable mindset by any standard whatsoever. So that is wonderful. If people want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so people can follow me at Akeem Shannon. That's Akeem Shannon, Shannon, on all social media channels. My website's AkeemShannon.com. We still have some Flipstiks left. They're in Targets and Best Buys and AT&Ts, and they also are on our website as well, getflipstik.com, as well as Amazon. So if you just search Flipstik, it'll pop up, and you can purchase those. And for someone, if you need a little encouragement, you're having trouble with your unstoppable mindset, and you just need a little bit of a push, feel free to text me. I have a text line dedicated to mentorship. I answer directly, and I also send, podcasts and messages and notes to people throughout the week.
So
And
what's
if
that?
people are
What's that
interested in
text
that,
number?
yeah, they can text me at 314-789 9005.
314
789
789
9005.
9005. Well, great. And I hope lots of people will reach out, and we really appreciate all of the insights and all of the joy you bring to what you do. And I realize that things happen, and we all have our challenges and we have to work through them, but you're clearly doing that. So thank you very much for sharing all of that with us. I'd love to hear from you about your thoughts about Akeem's presentation today and our podcast. Hope that you'll reach out to us. You can reach me, Michael HI at accessory.com, MICHAELHI at accessory.com. Love to get emails from you. You can also go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. That's MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. Hope that you will do that. And wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. We value your ratings a lot. We value your thoughts and opinions. So please feel free to give us a rating and keep in touch. And Akeem, for you and for anyone out there, if you know anyone else who we ought to have on the podcast, please let us know. Always looking for more people and people to be introduced to. So Akeem, your sports guy tomorrow, tell him we want him on the podcast. Just saying. But
I can do that.
We really appreciate anyone who's got someone in mind, or if you want to come on yourself, let us know. We're always looking to talk to people. Well, Akeem, once more, I want to thank you very much for being here and being a part of Unstoppable Mindset today.
Well, thank you, Michael. It was really, truly a pleasure.